Hello and welcome to Written Words. I'm Helen and YouTube tells me that this is my 100th video. So I decided to celebrate in linguistic style with a little bit of etymology and of course a spot of poetry too. When I was thinking about how I might celebrate this rather humble milestone, I started thinking about the number 100. And then I started thinking about the word hundred and realised it's a very interesting word that can tell us quite a lot about the history of the English language. So in this video I am going to explore the word hundred. 100 is of course a number. It's 10 times 10. It fits very nicely into the decimal system. So to begin with, let's look at a few other words from the dictionary that are derived from the word hundred. First of all, we have hundredth, which is a division of something into 100 parts. One of my favourites is hundreds and thousands, which are those tiny little multicoloured sweets that you sprinkle on cakes and ice creams to decorate them. There is 100-fold. If something is multiplied 100-fold, it's 100 times. And there is a unit of measurement called a hundredweight, which I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, is approximately 50 kilos. That one is particularly interesting and we'll come back to that in a moment. However, there are many other words in the English language which are connected with the number 100. But have a completely different root. The words do not resemble the word 100 at all. For example, the period of 100 years is a century. 100th of a metre is a centimetre. If we want to measure something in the rate per 100, we would use a percentage. 100th of a euro or a dollar is a cent. 100-year anniversary is a centenary. 100-year-old person is a centenarian. And coming back to that very interesting unit of measurement, the hundredweight, the abbreviation for a hundredweight you might expect might be something like HWT, but the abbreviation is actually CWT. So where does this difference come from? The English language, as you well may already know, developed over many hundreds of years through the influence of lots of other languages. As various different groups of peoples came to Britain, they brought their languages with them. If you're interested in learning more about the history of the English language, I did record a video some time ago about that, so the link is in the description below. To summarise, some of those main groups were the Celts, the Romans, the Vikings, the Anglo-Saxons and the Normans. And each group came to Britain bringing their language and adding their language to the linguistic concoction that gradually developed into the English language. So the word hundred comes from Anglo-Saxon roots. The people who we now know as the Anglo-Saxons were several tribes, the Angles, the Saxons, the Jutes, the Frisians, who came from the area that is approximately around about present-day Germany. So the languages that they brought with them were Germanic in origin, and therefore there are many similarities between words that we use in modern-day English and their equivalents in modern-day German. So the equivalent of the word hundred in English would be hundert in German. Dutch also comes from the same roots, and if we look at the modern day word for 100 in Dutch, you can see the resemblance. So hundred is an Anglo-Saxon word with Germanic origins. However, later on the Normans came to Britain and they brought their language with them, which was a variety of French, Norman French. And French in turn derives from Latin roots. So the Latin for 100 is centum. The French word for 100 is cent. If we look at the Spanish and the Italian words for 100, Again, you can see the resemblance because these languages derived from Latin. So the other words that describe things to do with 100, such as century and centimetre, come from the French or the Latin origins. Hence, we have a dual system for talking about things to do with 100. And this doesn't just apply to the word 100. There are many other words in the English language that follow a similar pattern. Staying with numbers, for example, the word 1,000 comes from Anglo-Saxon origins, but words related to the number 1,000, such as 1,000 years, which is a millennium, or 1,000th of a metre, which is a millimetre, come from the French and the Latin origins. It's also very interestingly visible in the names we have for meats and the animals that the meats come from. For example, pig is the name of an animal, and that word is from Anglo-Saxon origins, whereas the meat that is derived from a pig, pork, comes from the Norman French. Similarly, cow and beef, or deer and venison, and so on. And there are many, many more words in the English language where there are these parallels between the two different origins of the words. So that's a little bit of etymology about the word 100. And as usual, I wanted to illustrate this word somehow using something from literature. And as I was looking around, I found a rather beautiful poem by Thomas Hardy. It's called At Lulworth Cove a Century Back. And in the poem, the poet is visiting a place called Lulworth Cove, which is on a very beautiful stretch of coastline on the south of England. And he imagines a man there, a man who is setting sail, and he is setting sail to go to Rome. And the poet is imagining that this is taking place 100 years ago. When I first read the poem without any context, I wasn't quite sure who the man was supposed to be, the man who was sailing away to Rome, because this man is obviously somebody very important, but at the time when he's sailing to Rome, he isn't recognised as very important, and it's only with time that people come to realise his importance. And at first I thought maybe it's something to do with St. Peter, although he lived a lot longer ago than 100 years. But after a little bit of research, I discovered that the man that Hardy is writing about is John Keats, the poet. John Keats did indeed go to Rome towards the end of his very short life, and Hardy is imagining Keats setting sail from Lulworth Cove. When he left in 1820, he was relatively unknown and already very ill with tuberculosis. Unfortunately, he would only live for a few more months after arriving in Rome, where he died at, sadly, the very young age of 25. And it was not until after Keats' death that his work gradually gained recognition, so that a century later, when Hardy was writing his poem in the 1920s, Keats had by then become one of Britain's most admired poets. So this poem contains the word century and it contains the word 100. So here is At Lulworth Cove a Century Back by Thomas Hardy. Had I but lived 100 years ago, I might have gone as I have gone this year, by Warmwell Cross unto a cove I know, and time have placed his finger on me there. You see that man? I might have looked and said, Oh yes, I see him, one that boat has brought, which dropped down channel round St. Alban's head. So commonplace a youth calls not my thought. You see that man? Why, yes, I told you, yes, of an idling town sort, thin, hair-brown in hue. And as the evening light scants less and less, he looks up at a star, as many do. You see that man? Nay, leave me, then, I plead. I have 15 miles to vamp across the lea, and it grows dark, and I am weary-kneed. I have said the third time, yes, that man I see. Good, that man goes to Rome, to death, despair, and no one notes him now but you and I. 100 years, and the world will follow him there, and bend with reverence where his ashes lie. It's a lovely, albeit rather sad, conversation between Hardy's past self and his present self as he's writing the poem, about how it has taken 100 years for this man in Rome to be recognised for what he is. And now, 100 years later, people go on pilgrimages to Rome to see the place where Keats lived and died. So thank you very much for watching and joining me in my little etymological celebration. So there are now 100 videos on this channel about the English language and its literature. So do feel free to explore them and see if there are any more that are of interest to you. And to those of my faithful followers who have watched all or most of those videos, thank you very much. I hope you found something interesting and useful in them, and I hope you continue to enjoy the videos in the future. I have many more videos still in the pipeline, and I'm always open to suggestions. If there are other subjects that you would like to see me cover, please do let me know. In the meantime, my next video is going to be a return to George Eliot and specifically her novel The Mill on the Floss. I'm going to be exploring some of the locations that inspired the novel. So do watch this space for that one and many more videos to come. So thank you very much for joining me in this video. I look forward to seeing you in the next one. And in the meantime, happy reading and happy writing.